Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Harbridge. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I wanted to talk about the latest work trend index from Microsoft, its partners LinkedIn, Glint, and others. And this particular report is probably one of the most exciting work trend indexes. It's around hybrid work is just work. Are we just doing it wrong? I think that there's some really interesting concepts in it.
Lead is a remote-first company based out of Canada.
What makes a world-class Microsoft 365 intranet and digital workplace?
Now, today I'm going to take a slightly different approach than I've done in the past. Instead of just talking about this report itself and how it's structured, what data points are in it, I will do a little bit of that, to save you time reading it. I wanted to give you some quick feedback and context around each of these sections. So little story bites and insights that might help you synthesize the information in this report and maybe action it. So if we look at the first section of this report, probably the most important of these sections is around ending productivity paranoia. So first, let me state, a lot of people that I talk to don't know what this is. You're lucky your organization is not doing these motions, but there is a very negative fear, uncertainty, approach that some organizations are using where what they are concerned about is that remote employees or even maybe even on-prem employees in this post-pandemic era, are they being as productive as they could? Are they working hard? And honestly, that is the simple way of describing it, because what they do is they take screenshots on a regular interval, depending on which platforms they're using, of the employee's device. And so as they're working, it takes, random screenshots to kind of prove that they're working. Another thing that they'll often do with these tools is they'll track, your motions, right? Are you using the mouse? Are you typing? Are you doing things like that to kind of suggest an active state? Now, let me be clear. These motions start from a baseline of a negative assumption, right? That we want to make sure that people who are working harder, that they get the recognition and visibility for that, and the people that are working less, that, quite frankly, we get different ways of approaching that. I think there's a lot of problems with this approach from an industry perspective. I'm not alone in this. And so it's certainly a nice way of framing it is productivity paranoia. And Microsoft and others are calling for an end to it because it's not really a good long-term or sustainable solution, right? It's squeezing staff. It's creating the wrong motivations. It's, people are getting little tools. You can literally buy them on Amazon that move your mouse and do things like that to kind of, fight these tools. It's really not the right direction. So the opposite approach then is being sort of positive on your productivity, right? Taking productivity in a positive direction or being positive on productivity. And the way that I would frame that is where you essentially support staff in becoming more excellent, right? Kind of cyborgs. So you give them insights around how they're working digitally, and you tell them, hey, maybe this is a better way you could work digitally. You give them signals. Things like in Viva Insights today at personal levels, team levels, organizational levels are really good representations of that. You might do things like the way, ideas in PowerPoint works to help us all improve the way we create PowerPoints. That's a good example of AI and these tools actually helping people, level the playing field, right? I can make a great PowerPoint, look at me, but you can create a great PowerPoint because you can use these tools, probably a better looking one than the ones I create nowadays when you use PowerPoint ideas or things like that. So there are tools in our workplaces that essentially uplift us, right, or support us. Those are really positive ones. And then there are tools that don't. And the direction we should all have from an investment, a prioritization for employee experience is absolutely on the positive tools. So what is Microsoft really saying here? A couple key data points that I think are really useful. 87% of employees are basically saying they feel that they are quite productive, and that reconciles with the signals that we're seeing from a technology perspective. People using Microsoft 365, we can see a significant amount of productivity, digital productivity representation. And of course, people are saying that they're quite productive. So the question really becomes less about, are they productive or not? It's about what's stopping them from being, at 100%, or what's stopping them from, kind of working at their best. And that's where you get into some really interesting insights. Now, we know that key problem areas like meetings, that meetings can often feel unproductive. There's a lot of reasons for that. Too large meetings with too many participants, meetings that we've just seen a huge increase in volume and variety and velocity of meetings as well, like the frequency of them, the speed of like how quickly we get, the last minute meetings. Remote work has led to a lot more meetings. And so this leads to a lot of RSVP issues, people actually not not knowing if people are going to attend to them, and much, much more. So again, Microsoft has some great data points here to support, those understandings. And this is real rich data that you yourself can use to kind of frame, how we as an organization might want to tackle making meetings and the activities around meetings better. Now, I'm using meetings as a key consideration, but of course, all communication, email and otherwise, is also higher volume, variety, and velocity. Another interesting key point that Microsoft has here is that they essentially show that hybrid work is leading to this challenge. And so where does this paranoia actually stem from? Well, it stems from people being uncertain how people are working in this remote context. So, if you're in the office, I can kind of see you working. I can see when you're stressed. I can see, when I feel like, at least, you look like you're doing your best work. Those are things that we had, ways we could, helicopter, we could check in on people. And again, in a positive way to support them, right? We would have that. When people are remote, we feel we lose that. And so the question is how can we create the same kinds of experiences remotely? And I can tell you one of the most interesting data points, because we do a lot of workplace, I was going to say workplace analytics. We do a lot of Viva Insights engagements with large scale customers. And when we look at the data, you can see that, again, mainly because most leaders and managers historically are on site, they have the means and for a variety of reasons live near those physical offices. So it's easy for them to come to the office. So for most of them, because they have that sort of baseline understanding, you actually see that they spend more time digitally one-on-one with employees in the office environment. So if you think of work modes, you have sort of mostly on-site, hybrid, and mostly remote. You actually see a lot of these employers where the leaders and managers spend more time on a one-on-one context in digital signals. Because remember, digital signals are just some of it. You're having lots of these one-on-ones, water cooler discussions, other things like stopping by a desk. All of those things are not captured in what I'm saying, and yet still we see way more one-on-one time with those on-site workers. It's statistically across the industry. And I think that that's a really good signal to say, hey, we have a problem with mostly remote and hybrid workers where there's not enough manager one-on-one time. I think that's a fair statement. And you have the data. You yourself can run Viva Insights and get this kind of data very easily and accessibly. Use the work mode reporting and things like that in Power BI, and you're good to go. So these kinds of challenges are very real challenges today, and there's approaches like the one where I was suggesting where you can just say maybe, again, from a signal analysis perspective, either individually or organizational, from a privacy supported way, you could say, hey, I think, your business group or whatever, maybe you guys should spend a little bit more time prioritizing one-on-one time with those remote employees. And there's lots of these kinds of discussions, right? How can we support them? In addition to that, we also want to get visibility into employee work. So then the question becomes, how does that employee work align with output? Right? So you could look at things like Viva Goals and say, oh, well, that seems really interesting. We could have OKRs. If you achieve your goals, that's a pretty good indicator, right? The goals matter to the organization and they roll up all the way to the top level. And so we can actually see kind of the impact that you're having and driving and what matters, right? Really, truly what you're producing that matters is when you achieve a lot of those OKRs and goals. And so again, shifting an approach where we talk more about outcomes and things like that is, again, a very positive direction because that makes it a little bit more comfortable. As long as you're getting there and you're healthy and you're happy and, we're all working well together, then it really doesn't matter how you do that, right, from a day-to-day perspective. And so that can lead to some great outcomes here. So anyways, great insights, lots of data points here that you yourself can use to start to champion an understanding of performance, goal alignment, how do we get pulses on people? How do we do it all without being intrusive in the way that the screenshotting and the clicks and measurement type stuff that it absolutely does not positively support. And so here's another example around clarity. And I think, again, this is a really interesting one. Most people that feel like they have clarity about their work priorities, and again, this is something that you see a lot of times with previously AllIO and now Viva Goals, things where people feel like they know what they're supposed to prioritize. Again, management one-on-one time is a good indicator of this, right? They have that direction, they have that support, they got that kind of touch point regularly. All of these things and more lead to employees not being interested in exploring other opportunities opportunities. They're very happy to stay. Retention is much better and much more. So again, fundamentally, work clarity is a key driving force for this. And clarity can be measured in a few things, right? Of course, employee engagement style scoring. Glint themselves do that quite well. Now Viva Pulse and a variety of other things can do that. But you shouldn't underestimate the value of something like Viva Goals, or even using Viva Insights, like I was mentioning with manager engagement and other things that will all complement this. So essentially, we just can't do things the way we did them before. We have to use new digital technologies to augment the way we work, and that offsets these concerns and uncertainties and things like that, and again shifts it into a positive productivity direction. I'll skip over most of these other things. I do think, closing the feedback loop is an important one. I think a lot of times we think of that in a very lagging indicator perspective. We do like once a year employee satisfaction surveys. One of the key considerations here, besides, pulse surveys, which are more reactive, manager-led, even maybe peer-led discussions and things like that on well-being and things of that nature and employee engagement. Another key consideration is employee effort scoring. So if you're familiar with customer experience, you have customer sat, employee sat is kind of the equivalent of that. Both are lagging indicators. Whereas customer effort scoring, which is like how hard is it to buy your product or engage in your services, when you compare that to an employee term, employee effort scoring, how hard is it to do your job, to get the work done that you need to get done? That's something that we need to probably spend more time thinking about. And because it's a predictive indicator, right? Just like it is on the customer side, it's a predictive indicator internally. And so when you think of that kind of discussion, automation, support to reduce the number of clicks, streamlining, better intranet experiences, you name it, all sorts of things we do correlate to making it easier for employees or improving, that employee effort score. And that's, again, directionally where we should be spending more time and energy. All right. So, Microsoft's basically saying a lot of the same things here. So we'll skip on from that. And again, fundamentally, it's very, very important that leaders and employees are disconnected. So leaders do not have confidence that their team is highly productive. Employees are very confident they're very productive. The gap here is more of a gap in leadership understanding of the signals and data and ways in which they can get that insight without, again, being intrusive or negative, right? Paranoid. So that's a fundamental gap that needs to be solved. And I love this visual for communicating that. So section 2 here, embrace the fact that people come in for each other, is an important one as well. Now, for a long time, I have seen a very simple perspective of leaders, probably much to my chagrin, where they'll say, our culture is suffering because employees just aren't coming into the workplace. Let's get them in the office. And that will drive, workplace cultural improvements, connectivity, retention, networking, all these other things. And it is true, it can support that. But a lot of these people are mostly remote for a reason. Many of those people may not live near those offices. Fundamentally, we have to accept that some of these challenges are real challenges that are going to create a blocker for us to use the physical model to create that connection. You can do barbecues again, right? Let's have those barbecues. Let's have people connect with people outside their working groups. But you also have to make sure that there's a pathway for remote employees to have that connectivity, to have that engagement, right, with one another. And that network density of employees is a really important indicator for long-term success. And so what I would say here when you look at these types of insights around social connection is worth the commute and things like that is, at the end of the day, fundamentally, you have to have employee networking, employee connection, employee engagement experiences that are designed for mostly remote employees, not just the physical enabled employees to come into the office. And so if we look at their data sets here, one of the things that I really like is the motion around Yammer historically, or now Viva Engage, storylines, people being able to have perspective and connect with one another, follow each other. Those are things that both provide serendipitous value. Oh, you shared insight, this picture or this video about a discussion you recently had on a project. I'm actually doing something similar as a project. I was actually going to go do this. So what are you doing? And so that's that serendipitous value. It's, again, a positive productivity increase for both parties. You can also look at it as like questions and answers and things like that, where, if we have more questions and answers, it provides a little bit more connectivity to people outside of their working groups. It provides a way for people to reach out to people outside their working groups. If we have leadership corners and we have leadership experiences with AMAs and we have other things, again, it's creating more opportunities for leaders to be connected to employees and employees to be connected to leaders in different ways. And if we take all of that stuff further and actually create, employee icebreaking tools to, foster networks and help people, do coffee time and schedule meetings and other things with employees. Those are all things that really, really take this further. So again, I know Microsoft's data here, and it's understandable. It's based on, how do we do this at a simplistic level from where we are today? I think a lot more tactical, proactive investment from HR, from IT, from corporate comms, and from other groups needs to happen in connecting employees, not just with the content and communication and our messaging and our goals, which we talked about earlier, but actually with one another, because people work with people. They come into work to work with people. That is the driver of almost every business. So fundamentally, we have to invest in that. And then this is an interesting one, and I definitely attribute this. I think Satya has always done this really well. When he took leadership reins at Microsoft, he really emphasized this idea of re-onboarding, re-recruitment. And I think this is something that any organization can do at any time. Take a look at the people who are already at your organization and think, if we were to re-onboard them right now, what would be different in their experiences? And maybe we should package and frame that in the way that supports those employees and helps them grow. When you roll out something like Viva Goals, what we find is it transforms the discussion quite significantly, because people have roles and they have responsibilities, but what really matters is these things that are goals, OKRs, that we all kind of agree are, roll upable and that they matter in terms of outcomes, and a sense of like, yeah, you achieved the objectives of kind of your responsibilities instead of your whatever your role title is. And so when you reframe it that way, all of a sudden it becomes really useful to look at what skills make achieving those types of goals more successful. And if you look at LinkedIn's data, skills are becoming much more relevant and important in that, pre-onboarding, pre-discovery, when we're looking for the right talent and we're trying to bring them in, et cetera. So, these have a lot of benefits of looking and examining sort of a re-onboarding experience within your organization. And not only that, but remember that hybrid work and remote work, or mostly remote work, is fundamentally different than the way we were working before. So for employees who've been in the organization for a while, they've been onboarded in a more, historically different time for digital technology, for the way we work. And so re-onboarding, at least for a business transformation perspective, on, how do we work remotely now? How do we, achieve the objectives we have now? How do we become competitive? What is the lateral and opportunity, what are the opportunity movement options within the organization that you yourself can go and take on from a career development perspective and much more. So those are all things that just have changed so much. It makes total sense to reinvest in this. And I think this is a great emphasis for HR groups to take the sort of lead on, and then be supported by a number of other groups within the organizations. And I think one of the biggest ones here is how learning and development support works. A lot of times we think of learning and development, and I want to be clear, I do think learning and development can be driven by things like Viva Insights and traditional LMS and things like that. Viva Insights being a little different because it's not just the traditional LMS, but social learning. Like a peer can say, hey, Richard, I think you'd really benefit from learning a little bit more about, this pattern. Oh, thank you. I'll go take that course and learn about it, and then we can connect, right? Again, employee connection is being built, and I'm learning. And so that's important. But also think about specialized opportunities that you're creating in an organization. I was just at an event where I was talking about employee experience trends yesterday. And one of the biggest things that I mentioned that I think has a huge influence is low-code, no-code solutioning. So a lot of organizations today, they're going through this transformation where they're trying to build, a better way to work, right? And a lot of those better ways to work are digitally, more savvy than the way they are now. And there are people that want to help with that transformation. And those are career-making opportunities to build, those types of solutions. It's very accessible because low-code platforms like Power Platform and other things like that are so easy to kind of get started with and use. And so what you really want to do is you want to evaluate whether you as an organization are really creating opportunities for that. I know it may sound like, oh, I'm talking to IT and I'm saying, oh, IT, you should be driving success, for learning and development, but you should, right? IT, not just for like, here's how to, self-service and, we create a digital center of excellence for digital excellence, right? But what if we actually looked at IT and said, hey, they have a really big fundamental program around Power Platform and helping employees kind of build useful solutions using, RPA and UiPath, you name it, anything that helps them build, effective, improvements on the process, and we'll amplify that. We'll give you visibility. We'll give you support. You'll be in a directory. You'll be able to, share that externally, and here's the pathway to do that. These are all things organizations could do, and I'm using a very particular wave that's happening, a very significant technological wave that's impacting organizations, with citizen development or distributed development, et cetera, meaning, low code, no code solutions. But I think that's a good example of a different lens on when we talk about learning. Learning is multifaceted, and what people really want is development and career growth opportunities. And sometimes, that is in the coursework and other things you're going to create, but sometimes, and obviously management interactions and things like that, but sometimes it's really in programmatic models where we create opportunities for people to have a voice and be, highly visible and maybe even awarded things when they're doing a lot in storylines in Microsoft Viva Engage, where they have these really highly followed blogs and insights where they can, again, automate processes and build solutions. Even if it's, 3 people work together to build this little solution that saves X dollars, it's still something that's meaningful. And so that's really what I would kind of highlight people to think about when they look at these learning sections. At the end of the day, the other key takeaway, I think, from this entire learning section is that the marketplace for skills and employee capture, like bringing employees in, emphasizes skills a lot more. And so what I mean by that is the examples I gave around low code, that emphasizes skills, right? The people that are going to be successful in achieving results in those things, that are going to come and want to work at your company, are the people who have those skills, and that's why they're coming to work at your company. So the more we can emphasize, instead of responsibilities, you must do these things in job descriptions as an example, and we emphasize skills, and in our own evaluation of people, we emphasize skills, that tends to generally lead to a better result. So I hope this has been helpful. There's a lot of wonderful insights within this report. Take a look at yourself, extract the data that is going to help you, talk to your managers, talk to your executives. And, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to give you some perspectives from our own experiences working with customers, as well as what we're seeing from a research perspective that complements what Microsoft has recently released in this report. Hope this has helped you. If you have your own feedback or questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Bye for now.